Hello there, welcome back. In this video you are gonna find all the steps that you need to follow to stitch and complete your Heidi skirt. Before starting, I strongly recommend to read the handbook because there you are gonna find all the information that you need to work with your patterns. For example, the type of files that you have there to download, the setting that your printer should have to print the patterns in the right scale, how to attach the paper sheets if you are working in the letter scale, in the letter size, how to read the patterns, the sizes that are available to work with the pattern, the seam allowance that are suggested or the seams allowance that you need to work with, the materials, some fabric suggestions, and also I decided to add a little bit of information about how to work with knit, since this pattern has been created to work using a fabric that has a stretch. I believe that this information can be helpful for you at the moment of selecting the fabric or working with the fabric itself. In addition, you will find more information on the handbook as well, such as how to cut the patterns, how to place the pattern on the fabric, and the written instructions of the sewing process step by step with illustrations to make it easier to follow. Once you print your patterns, you are going to find 3 pieces that conform the front part of the skirt. Then you are going to find 3 more pieces that conform the back part of the skirt or the back pattern. Even though these pieces front and back look very similar, they are not the same, so it's important that you identify them to avoid confusion. Then you're going to find 2 more pieces that look alike but they are not the same, and these are the flare pieces. One of them must be cut twice, and that is the flare piece that you are going to add on the size of the skirt. And the other flare piece that it says it must be cut 6 times is the one that you are going to add in the rest of the curved areas that you are going to find on the skirt. Finally, the last pattern that you are going to find is the waistband. This pattern has been made using layers, which means that you can print only the size of your preference, or you can print all the sizes that you decide at the same time. To select your size, remember to check in the handbook the sizes available and check your own measurements to see which size fits better your body. If you are between 2 sizes, select the biggest size and make all the adjustments that are necessary. Select a fabric that has a good amount of elasticity on it, and let's start working. First, fold the fabric in half, facing right side together. Then place the patterns on top, following the instructions and the grain line listed on the pattern. Adjust the patterns with some pins to avoid movement, and then start cutting, following the outer edge of the pattern. Remember that the patterns already have seam allowance included. When cutting the flare piece, you have to keep in mind that you have 2 different pieces for this pattern. One of them must be cut twice, and the other one has to be cut 6 times. To make this process a little bit more efficient, you can fold your fabric in half as many times as the fabric allows you to do, and then just place your pattern on top, fix the pattern with some pins to avoid movement, and cut following the outer edge of the pattern. This technique is going to allow you to be more efficient when cutting the pattern, because you can cut several pieces at the same time. To cut the waistband, place the fabric on fold, put the pattern on top, and start cutting following the outer edge of the paper. Before removing the pattern from the fabric, remember to mark all the notches and all the instructions listed on the paper. This is going to be super helpful when we start sewing. Cleaning the raw edges of the fabric using a serger or a zigzag stitch is an important step to follow when we are stitching a piece. Since we are working with a knit fabric and normally this kind of fabric doesn't fray, the serging process is optional. However, keep in mind that it gives to the piece a more professional and cleaner finish. Before starting, select the right type of stitch that you need for your fabric. For example, some stitch that you can use for stretch fabrics are zigzag, overlocking, or stretch stitch. Let's start assemble the back. To do this, place the back center panel pieces one on top of each other, facing right side together, and stitch the center seam using 1/2 inch of seam allowance. Place back middle panel pattern pieces on top of the back panel piece that you just stitched in the previous step. Make sure you match the notches when joining the pieces and face right side together of each piece. Then stitch the piece from top to bottom using half an inch of seam allowance and repeat the same step on the other side as well. To complete the back, we are going to add the back side panel piece. We are going to place this piece facing right side together on top of the back middle panel pattern. Again, matching the notches and keeping in mind that in the patterns there is a written specification of where you have to join the pieces because each side of them is different. Just repeat the same step at the other side and stitch using half an inch of seam allowance. As you can see, the different pieces that conform this pattern have different lengths, so just stop your stitch at the end of the shorter piece. Now the back is almost complete, so let's press all the seams to get a better finish, and you can even top stitch the piece if you like to. Then save the piece for later and let's start working on the front. To assemble the front pattern, we are going to follow the same steps that we already did before in the back. So we are going to place the front middle panel pattern on top of the front center panel pattern, facing right side together and stitching the piece at half an inch of seam allowance. Then repeat the same procedure in the other side and use the same seam allowance. Now let's join the front side panel pattern. We are going to face right side together and we are going to stitch from top to bottom using half an inch of seam allowance. And we are going to repeat the same procedure on the other side as well. Now we can press the seams and top stitch them if we like to. Then we are gonna place our front pattern piece on top of our back pattern piece facing right side together. And we are gonna stitch the sides using half an inch of seam allowance. At this point we are gonna try the skirt on to check the general fit. Since we are working with a fabric that has a stretch, this is the right moment to make all the adjustments on the piece that are necessary. Now we are gonna start working on the flare piece. And this is the most challenging part of the project so far because we have to attach those curved areas into the skirt. Sometimes sewing curve can be a little bit complicated, so I'm going to be sharing with you some tips that will make this process a little bit easier. Using a basting stitch, stitch the top of the curved area from notch to notch at 1/8 of seam allowance from the edge of the piece and leave long tail thread that you can pull after. Now we are going to pull the bobbin thread softly and evenly around all the curved area of the piece. This step is going to add a little bit of shape to the skirt and it's going to be making the process of attaching it to the skirt so much easier. It's important that you remember that even though it seems like we are gathering, we are not, because here we are just removing a little bit of the ease, so you don't need to pull the thread so much. Basically, you are going to be doing this process by eye, and when you attach the piece into the skirt, you can make all the adjustments that you need. If you need to pull the thread a little bit more, or if on the contrary you need to release a little bit of the ease that we remove. Now install the curved pieces into the skirt. To do this, face right side together of the fabric, matching the notches that you have on the flare piece and also on the skirt. You have like these main specific points where the notches are, so just put some pins there to adjust the piece, like the main points, and then you are going to use pins to adjust the rest of the piece. Now we are going to base stitch our piece to keep the pieces fixed, leaving the side and back center seams open and the middle seams placed towards to the center of the piece or open if the fabric allows you to. Then sew the pieces together using 1/4 of an inch of seam allowance. Now let's start working on the waistband of the piece. To do this, fold the waistband in half facing right side together and stitch the piece using 1/4 of an inch of seam allowance. Now try the waistband on to check the general fitting. Also, you can fold the waistband in half to have a better idea of how the skirt is gonna look like. Finally, try to adjust the waistband to your own measurements, keeping in mind that you need to pass this part of the waistband into your hips as well, so I strongly recommend do not leave the waistband too tight in order to get a piece that is comfortable but also fits you well. Before attaching the waistband, let's mark the front and side notches. To do this, we are going to use the seam that the waistband has as a guide. Then we are going to lay flat our waistband placing the waistband stitch towards one of the sides of the waistband, and in the opposite side of that waistband stitch that we have, we are gonna make our first notch. This notch is our center notch. Then align this new center notch with the waistband stitch. This alignment will be at the center of the waistband, so you can mark 2 new notches at each side of the waistband now. Now let's install the waistband. To do this, insert the skirt into the waistband, face right side together, and match the center notch with the center of the skirt. Do the same at the back, mark the center notch of the waistband with the center of the skirt, and repeat the same procedure with the sides. First, match these 4 main points, and then continue matching the rest of the skirt with the waistband using pins for better adjustment. Since we are working with a fabric that has elasticity, our waistband is a little bit smaller than the regular waist of our skirt. So maybe we are gonna need to stretch a little bit between the main points, the main notches, to align the pieces and the fabric perfectly, and then we just can stitch the pieces together using 1/4 inch of seam allowance. Then place the seam towards the skirt and top stitch it to get a better finish. To complete our skirt, we have to finish the hem. As you can see here, the flare piece has a little bit of curve in the hem. So to make this process easier and to get a beautiful result, you can repeat the steps that you did when you were attaching the curved area into the skirt. You can basting stitch the edge of the curved area at 1/8 of seam allowance from the edge of the piece. Then you can pull a little bit the threads, the bobbin thread, just to get a little bit of shape, and then you can press up 1/2 inch of the piece, checking that when you turn the fabric inside it looks neat and the fabric is not puckering. If the fabric is puckering, you can release or pull a little bit more the threads, but remember, you are not gathering, so it's just a little bit to get the shape that you need. Once this is done and you have the shape and the result that you like, you just need to stitch around all the hem of the piece as close as possible to the raw edge of the fabric.